The sky above Rixar 9 was the color of fire and rust. Every gust of wind carried sand sharp enough to cut steel, and the air shimmered with toxic heat. The storms came without warning, blinding flashes of light that burned through the horizon, leaving behind silence and glass. It was a world that killed everything that touched it. The Federation had sent probes, drones, and machines over the centuries. None survived for more than an hour. The atmosphere corroded metal, the radiation fried circuits, and the ground itself seemed to pulse with hostility. "No creature can live here," the scientists had said. "It's a dead world." But humans had never been good at listening to warnings. Captain Daniel Holt stared out from the cockpit of his landing craft as the red haze thickened around him. His console blinked with alerts, radiation spikes, thermal breaches, hull integrity warnings, but his hands stayed steady on the controls. He'd heard it all before. The words of his colleagues echoed in his mind. "You can't do this, Holt. You'll die before you even touch the ground. No one can live there." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll be no one," he had told them. The ship shuddered as it broke through the final layer of storm clouds. The wind slammed against the hull like a living thing. Every system screamed in protest, but Holt gritted his teeth and forced the ship down. "Hold together, girl," he whispered to the craft, his voice low and calm. "Just a little longer." Through the window, he saw lightning rip across the horizon, illuminating black mountain ridges and rivers of molten stone. There were no oceans, no plants, no sign of life, only endless desolation. When the landing thrusters fired, they spat blue fire into the dust. The craft hit the ground hard, skidding across glass-like sand before coming to a violent stop. The silence afterward was deafening. Holt unstrapped himself, his muscles aching. The smell of ozone filled the cabin. Half the systems were fried, but he was alive. That was enough. When he opened the hatch, the air hit him like a hammer. His visor fogged instantly. The heat clawed at his suit, and the wind howled around him like a living storm. He stepped out slowly, boots sinking into black dust. "Welcome home," he muttered. The ground hissed beneath his feet. Tiny sparks danced where his boots touched the surface, the static energy building with every step. He could feel the planet's hostility in the air, like it wanted to erase him the moment he arrived. He smiled beneath his cracked helmet. "You'll have to try harder than that." For hours he walked through the storm, searching for a place to begin. His oxygen alarms blinked red, but he ignored them. Every instinct told him to leave, to get back on the ship and fly away. But he couldn't. He hadn't come to survive, he'd come to build. Holt stopped near a jagged ridge that shielded him from the wind. The rock here was strange, dark, metallic, almost alive. He struck it with his tool, expecting it to shatter. Instead, it rang like a bell. He struck again, harder this time. The echo rolled across the valley, deep and hollow. "Good bones," he said softly. "We can work with that." He spent the next few days setting up what little equipment still worked. His survival tent melted in the first storm, so he slept under the hull of the broken ship. When food rations ran low, he modified the air filters to condense liquid from the atmosphere, poisonous at first, then slowly drinkable after hundreds of adjustments. He learned the rhythm of the storms, how to time his movement between bursts of wind and lightning. He learned how to use the planet's own minerals as armor, how to shield himself from the radiation that burned through his clothes. Every day, the planet tried to kill him. Every day, he answered back with stubborn silence. And somewhere in that battle, something began to change. By the end of the first week, the Federation assumed him dead. His ship's transponder had gone silent. The last transmission they received was a short one. "Touchdown complete. Ground's hot, skies angry, perfect." Then nothing. They marked his name as lost. But down on Rixar 9, the humans still worked. One night, the storms grew so violent that the ground itself lifted in waves. Lightning struck the ridge again and again, splitting the sky open. The temperature soared beyond what his suit could handle. Holt crawled beneath the ship and listened to the world roar around him. Any sane person would have begged for rescue, but he laughed instead, a hoarse, exhausted laugh that echoed through his helmet. "Is that all you've got?" he shouted into the storm. When the lightning hit the ridge above him, the flash illuminated something new. a strange glimmer in the rock, like veins of metal glowing blue beneath the surface. He stared in awe. The storm had cracked open the planet's crust, revealing a material he had never seen before, light as glass, strong as steel. He reached out and touched it. It pulsed faintly under his glove, humming with energy. "Guess you do have a heartbeat," he whispered. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was clearer than before, the heat less suffocating. The planet seemed to rest, as if watching what he would do next. Holt picked up his tools and started working. He didn't know how long he'd last. He didn't care. They said no creature could live here. He wasn't here to live. He was here to build. And for the first time since humanity had stared into the stars, the dead world of Rixar 9 had a heartbeat, and it was human. The second sunrise on Rixar 9 didn't look like morning at all. It looked like the sky was bleeding. The horizon glowed deep red, turning the black sand into rivers of fire. The air shimmered with heat, and the storm clouds rolled far away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than sound. Captain Daniel Holt sat beside his broken ship, staring at the ridge where lightning had struck the night before. In the cracks of that ridge, the strange glowing veins still pulsed faintly blue. He hadn't slept. His suit was cracked, his oxygen filters were burning out, and the temperature inside his helmet kept climbing. But his eyes were alive. "All right," he muttered, gripping his tools. "Let's see what you're hiding." The material was unlike anything he'd ever seen. When he chipped away at the black crust, the blue core beneath was smooth and warm, almost soft. His instruments couldn't scan it properly. The readings flickered between unknown and energy source. He cut out a small shard and held it up to the light. The glow pulsed, brighter when he touched it, softer when he pulled away. "Living metal," he said quietly. "You're alive, aren't you?" It felt like the planet was breathing beneath his hands. By midday, he had gathered enough of the material to start testing. He melted some of it in a small plasma crucible, but it didn't behave like normal metal. It didn't melt, it changed. The glowing surface rippled like water, then hardened again, stronger than before. When he tried to break it, his hammer bounced off with a ring like music. "This could work," he whispered, grinning through cracked lips. "You can kill me all you want, but I'll build something you can't destroy." The planet answered with a low rumble beneath his feet. He looked up at the red sky and smiled. Challenge accepted. The days turned into a rhythm. Every morning he woke before the heat grew unbearable. He mined the glowing stone, melted it, and shaped it into plates. He built molds from the broken pieces of his ship, reforging its skeleton into a foundation. Every night he collapsed inside the shattered hull, listening to the howling wind. He kept talking to the planet, as if it could hear him. "You're stubborn," he'd say while welding. "You nearly cooked me today," he'd mutter while fixing filters. "But you'll be beautiful one day." His voice was the only sound for miles. And yet sometimes, when he spoke, the ground pulsed softly beneath him, like it was answering. On the 9th day, the storms returned. He'd been building the framework of his shelter, 4 walls of living stone, fused together by heat and sheer determination. When the first gust hit, it nearly tore him from the ground. He dove behind a half-finished wall, clutching his helmet. The lightning screamed across the sky, striking the ridge over and over. "Come on," he shouted, shielding the power core he'd rigged from his ship's remains. The wind tried to rip it away, but he held fast. The storm lasted for hours. When it finally cleared, the surface around him was scorched black, but his wall still stood. He ran his hand over it. The metal was glowing faintly, humming with power. The storm hadn't destroyed it. It had made it stronger. That night he sat beside the wall, staring at the stars. His suit's power reserves were almost empty. His oxygen was thinning. He could barely feel his fingers. He thought of Earth, of rain on metal roofs, of coffee in a warm hand, of his daughter's laughter. He'd left them behind to prove something. To himself, to the universe, maybe even to the ghosts of every explorer who'd ever died trying to build a home in the impossible. He whispered to the night, "They said no creature can live here." He laughed softly. "Guess they've never met a human." The next morning, he nearly didn't wake up. His oxygen alarm blared weakly, and his body ached with dehydration. He forced himself up, dragging the backup tanks from the wreckage. He had 2 left. That meant maybe 3 days of air, 4 if he rationed. He looked at his unfinished shelter and the endless black desert beyond. Most would have stopped. Most would have surrendered. But Holt wasn't most. He strapped on his tools and went back to work. By the 12th day, his house, if one could call it that, was half complete. The walls hummed with faint blue veins that responded to his touch. He'd learned how to channel heat into them, shaping them without breaking. When he walked inside, the air was cooler. He froze, staring at his helmet's readings. Radiation levels down, temperature stable. He took a cautious breath, then another. The air inside wasn't clean, but it was breathable. He tore off his helmet. For a heartbeat, he thought he'd die, but then he inhaled again. The air burned, but it filled his lungs. He laughed until his voice cracked. "You're doing it," he whispered. "You're learning." The planet somehow was changing. The walls of his shelter pulsed softly, filtering the air through unknown reactions. It was as if the planet itself wanted to help him now. That night, as he lay on the floor, he placed his palm on the glowing wall. "Good work today," he murmured. The wall vibrated faintly, almost like a purr. He smiled through tears he hadn't realized were falling. "Yeah," he whispered, "we'll build something beautiful, you and me." Above him, the storms raged again, but this time the wind couldn't reach him. The thunder was distant, like the growl of a tired beast that finally respected its opponent. And for the first time in centuries, Rixar 9, this dead, forgotten world, held something that lived. A spark. A beginning. A home. The 12th sunrise on Rixar 9 looked different. The light was softer, the air slightly clearer. It was still poisoned to breathe freely, but something had shifted, something small but alive. Captain Daniel Holt stood outside his half-built shelter, staring at the horizon. The storms had not returned since the last one. The winds still hissed, but they no longer screamed. The ground trembled, but it didn't break. It was as if the planet had grown curious about the stubborn creature walking on its skin. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself, "You're watching me now, aren't you?" The breeze that passed over him carried a low hum. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe it was an answer. The house was more than walls now. It was a living structure, metal fused with stone, glowing softly at night like embers beneath ash. The walls absorbed heat during the day and released it during the cold nights. The air inside was cleaner every morning. Holt had mapped the pattern of the glowing veins that ran through the stone. They pulsed in rhythm with something deeper, perhaps the planet's core, perhaps something alive under the crust. He wasn't sure, he only knew one thing. He was no longer surviving against the planet, he was surviving with it. Still, the work was far from over. The storms might have slowed, but they would come back. He needed a foundation that could hold against them all, something that would last longer than his heartbeat. His suit was almost useless now. The filters were clogged, the seals failing. His body bore the marks of his defiance, burns across his arms, blisters on his face, fingers raw from scraping and shaping the living stone. Yet when he looked at what he'd built, he felt something fierce inside him, pride. No one had ever built anything here, not a drone, not a machine. Only him, a single human standing on a world that wanted him dead. And somehow he was winning. He spent the next days deep in the ridge, carving channels beneath the surface. He needed to root the structure, anchor it to the bones of the planet itself. The deeper he went, the stranger things became. The stone glowed brighter, humming louder. Sometimes it almost sounded like a heartbeat. Other times it felt like whispers crawling through the dark. He would pause, press his ear to the rock, and listen. It didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded alive. When he finally returned to the surface, covered in ash and glowing dust, he felt lighter, almost energized. His tools worked smoother, his systems lasted longer than they should have. He laughed softly, looking at the sky. "You're feeding me now, aren't you?" The wind shifted, and the walls of his shelter pulsed faintly. "Guess that's a yes." By the 15th day, the shelter had become a fortress. Thick walls rose around him, shaped by fire and patience. The roof was layered with living stone that shimmered in the sun and bled off radiation like steam. Inside, his makeshift power core hummed gently. The air was breathable without a helmet now, though it still burned slightly in his lungs. He coughed and smiled anyway. Progress. He recorded a message into his suit log, his voice rough but calm. Day 15, structure stable. Atmosphere reading at 23% normalization, radiation decreasing. To whoever finds this, we were wrong about this world. It's not dead, it just needed someone to listen. He paused before ending the recording. And maybe that's what humans do best. We listen to what others call impossible. That night he couldn't sleep. The ground trembled again, not from anger but from movement. He stepped outside, watching as faint blue lights crawled along the valley floor, like veins spreading outward from his home. They reached into the darkness, far beyond what his eyes could see. "What are you doing?" he whispered. The wind brushed against him, soft and warm. Then from somewhere deep below came a low, resonant thrum. A sound that wasn't natural, it was communication. And for the first time, Holt understood. The planet was responding to him, adapting, evolving. He had built a house, and the planet had decided to build around it. The next morning, he woke to the sound of rain. Not the deadly acid rain that melted his first tent. This was different, lighter, almost gentle. The droplets hissed where they touched the ground, releasing steam, but they didn't corrode. Holt stepped outside and lifted his face to the sky, letting the drops strike his helmet. The readings spiked briefly, acidic, yes, but less deadly than before. He laughed, breath fogging the visor. "You're learning faster than I did." The ground vibrated faintly, and the blue veins glowed brighter. He could feel it now, the bond, the connection. He had given the planet something to hold on to, a structure, a pattern, a purpose. And in return, Rixar 9 had given him something back. Life. By nightfall, he stood on the ridge again, watching the lights pulse across the valley. They spread like roots, linking stone to stone, mountain to mountain. He whispered into the wind, "You were never dead, were you? Just waiting for someone stubborn enough to stay." The answer came in silence, in light, in the faint hum beneath his feet. He smiled, the exhaustion heavy but warm in his chest. "They said no creature can live here," he murmured. "They were right." He turned toward the glowing shelter behind him. "No creature can, but humans, we don't just live." He placed a hand on the wall, feeling it vibrate softly under his touch. "We build." And under the blood-red sky, a single house stood against eternity, alive, defiant, and human. Far above Rixar 9, a patrol ship drifted through the gray edges of its atmosphere. It was a small Federation craft, crewed by 4 scientists and 1 nervous pilot. They weren't soldiers, they were researchers, curious, cautious, and utterly convinced that nothing could survive down there. Yet the readings told a different story. "Captain," the lead scientist whispered, staring at her console, "there's heat signatures." The captain frowned. "That can't be. The planet's surface temp fluctuates too violently. No living thing could keep consistent warmth." "I know," she said, "but look, this isn't random, it's rhythmic, controlled." On her screen, faint blips pulsed across the surface, tiny points of light arranged in a pattern, like veins, like a heartbeat. The Federation had long written Rixar 9 off as a cursed world. Exploration ships that entered its orbit returned half-melted, their sensors fried, their drones vaporized. But these new signals couldn't be ignored. They decided to send a drone. It was a sleek silver sphere, reinforced with triple shielding and adaptive thrusters, the most advanced piece of unmanned tech the Federation had. It lasted 6 minutes. They watched in silence as the feed flickered, showing flashes of black sand, glowing blue cracks, and just for an instant, a structure. Not natural. Not alien. Built. Then the screen went white, the drone melted midair. "Someone's down there," the scientist breathed. "Something's building." "That's impossible," said another. "The radiation alone." The captain turned from the window. "It's not impossible, it's human." The silence that followed was heavy. No one spoke. The Federation had lost a human ship here months ago, a single explorer named Daniel Holt. His signal had vanished within hours of landing. They'd assumed the storms had consumed him. But now, the idea crawled into everyone's mind. What if he was still alive? Back on the surface, Daniel was unaware of the watchers above. He was working on the roof of his shelter, welding a new plate of living stone into place. His hands shook from exhaustion, but his eyes burned with focus. Each spark that leapt from the welder mixed with the blue glow of the stone, creating a dance of light. He had learned how to bend it, how to make it hum in harmony with the planet's rhythm. It wasn't just a shelter anymore. It was alive. And when he worked, he swore the walls pulsed brighter, as if proud of his effort. That night while he rested, a sound echoed faintly through the thin air. A hum high-pitched and steady, like machinery cutting through wind. He stood stepping outside. Above the clouds, a faint flash of silver streaked by. He frowned. "Federation drone," he muttered. He knew the Federation would come eventually. They always came, curious, cautious, afraid of what humans might find. He stared at the faint shimmer of the sky. "You'll come down here, won't you?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'll see." Up in orbit, the researchers debated. "We need to send a team down," said the lead scientist. "Whatever's happening there, it's rewriting planetary behavior. The storms are weakening. The radiation levels are falling." "That's not possible in a geological time frame," said another, "unless something is changing the planet itself." The captain stared at the fading readings on the screen. "Prepare a landing pod. I'll take a small team. If this is Holt, we bring him home." When they descended, the planet greeted them with silence. Their ship pierced the clouds and landed near the glowing ridge. The sensors screamed immediately: "Heat, radiation, unstable ground." But what caught their eyes wasn't the danger, it was the light. The valley was alive. Glowing lines ran through the sand like rivers of blue fire. And at the center, rising proudly against the red sky, was a structure, smooth, organic, shining like a heart made of stone. And standing in front of it was a man. Daniel Holt stood barefoot on the dark sand, his face scarred and burned, his clothes reduced to scraps. Yet his eyes were steady and sharp. He raised a hand in greeting. "Careful where you step," he called out, ground still moody. The Federation captain stepped forward, awed. "Holt, you're alive." He grinned faintly. "Define alive." The captain looked around, scanning the walls, the glowing veins running through them. What is this?" "My house," Holt said simply. One of the scientists stared in disbelief. "You built this here, out of this material?" He touched the wall gently. "Not just me," he said. "She helped." "She?" He gestured to the ground. "The planet, she's not dead, just misunderstood." They didn't know what to say. The sensors were going wild. The air was 60% cleaner than expected. The radiation had dropped by half in the immediate area. Holt noticed their confusion and smiled softly. "I stopped fighting her," he said. "Started listening. She talks, you know, not with words, through pressure, energy, light." He stepped closer to the captain. "We always think survival means conquering, but sometimes it means understanding." The captain shook his head slowly. "Holt, you've done something impossible." "Yeah," Holt said, looking at his glowing house. "That's kind of what we do." The team recorded everything: samples, readings, holograms. They wanted to take pieces of the living stone back to study, but when they tried to cut a sample free, the planet reacted. The air hissed, the veins pulsed red for the first time. Holt stepped between them and the wall. "Don't," he said quietly. "She doesn't like being hurt." The scientists froze. He looked up at the red sky. "You didn't come here to listen, you came to take." Then softly, almost kindly, "That's why you'll never understand her." The wind began to rise again. The sand shimmered with heat. The team backed toward their shuttle, fear flickering across their faces. Holt stood still, his silhouette framed by blue light. "Go home," he said. "Tell them this place isn't dead, it's just waiting for someone willing to stay." As the ship lifted off, one of the scientists looked down through the viewport and whispered, "He's building more." Indeed, new lines of blue light were spreading outward, forming circles, patterns, almost like roots. High above, the Federation ship drifted silently. Inside, the captain stared at the planet glowing faintly below. "No creature can live there," she whispered. Her voice trembled as she added, "But maybe that's the problem, he's not just living." She looked at the data again, the air, the soil, the energy flow. "He's changing it." The transmission from Rixar 9 spread through the Federation like wildfire. Every outpost, every research hub, every academy replayed the footage again and again. A man standing barefoot on a world that should have burned him alive, surrounded by walls that pulsed with light. Some called it a miracle. Others called it madness. On the surface of that deadly world, Captain Daniel Holt worked quietly, unaware that his name had become a war between scientists and politicians light years away. He wasn't thinking about fame or fear. He was thinking about the roof that needed fixing. The air had become thicker now, easier to breathe. The winds had softened into whispers. Small patches of glowing moss had begun to form near the base of his shelter, the first sign of life the planet had shown in centuries. Holt crouched to study them. The moss shimmered blue-green, tiny sparks dancing between its leaves. When he touched it, it didn't burn. "Hello there," he murmured with a faint smile. "Didn't expect company." He placed a small glass cover over it, careful and gentle. "You grow, I'll protect you." The ground under him hummed softly, as if in approval. High above, on the Federation flagship Aurora, chaos filled the council chamber. "He's altering a planetary ecosystem," one scientist shouted. "He's breaking laws of physics," another argued. A general slammed his fist against the table. "He's playing God on a volatile world. If that planet destabilizes, the entire sector could collapse." The lead scientist, Dr. Rien, stood calmly among the shouting. She'd seen the footage. She, spoken to Holt through brief transmissions, she felt the quiet certainty in his voice. "He's not destroying it," she said softly. "He's healing it." The room went still. "Rixar 9 has been dead for millennia. We've only ever taken from it. He gave it something back, structure, purpose." The planet responded. The general sneered. "You sound like one of those Earth romantics. Planets don't respond, they decay." Dr. Rien turned to the screen. "Then explain this." On the display, Rixar 9 pulsed faintly in the dark, veins of blue light spreading like rivers of life. Back on the planet, Holt was finishing his work for the day. He'd built 2 new walls, smaller extensions to house tools and power storage. The living stone responded faster now, almost eager to grow. He could feel the energy flowing under his feet, strong and warm. He leaned against the wall, sweat running down his neck, and whispered, "We're getting there, aren't we?" The walls pulsed gently, a slow heartbeat. He closed his eyes, listening. Then faintly he heard it, a voice. Not words exactly, but rhythm and tone, the sound of the planet itself. It was low, almost like a lullaby. He smiled. "Yeah, I hear you." That night the sky burned again, not from storms this time, but from engines. Federation ships. He saw their silhouettes descend through the red clouds. For the first time in weeks, fear flickered in his chest. He grabbed his radio and tuned in to their frequency. "This is Captain Holt. You don't need to come down." A calm voice replied, "Captain, this is Commander Soren of the Aurora. We're here to extract you." "Extract?" Holt laughed softly. "I'm not a specimen, Commander. I'm home." There was a pause. "You're endangering yourself and Federation property. That planet isn't stable." "Neither were humans," Holt said quietly, "until we decided to build." The line went silent. When they landed, the soldiers came armed. Holt stood in front of his home, hands empty, eyes steady. "You don't need those," he said. "This place doesn't like violence." The commander stepped forward. "Stand down, Captain. You're under protective detainment." Holt looked past him to the glowing horizon. "No one's detaining anyone. This planet isn't what you think. She's alive." The soldiers glanced at one another. The air around them hummed faintly, the ground vibrating under their boots. "Alive," the commander scoffed. "It's rock and radiation." Holt shook his head. "It was, now it's something more." The commander raised a hand. "Seize him." The moment they stepped forward, the ground screamed. A tremor ripped through the valley. The glowing veins flared bright red. A gust of wind knocked everyone off balance. Holt shouted over the roar, "Stop, you're scaring her." The soldiers stumbled back as the walls of the house flared to life, glowing like shields, sending ripples through the sand. The commander fell, staring in horror. "What's happening?" "She's protecting me," Holt said. "She knows what you bring: fear, control, destruction. That's what she's always known, but I taught her something new." He reached out, placing his hand on the wall. The light softened immediately, changing from red to calm blue. Drust. The storm stilled, the air cleared, the hum faded. The soldiers lay motionless, staring at the glowing human who stood against the sky, one hand on the living stone. Commander Soren rose slowly, his voice unsteady. "You've bonded with it, haven't you?" Holt nodded. "We share the same thing, Commander. We survive what others can't." He looked toward the horizon, where the glowing roots spread wider each day. "She doesn't need me to lead her anymore," he said softly, "but she needed someone to believe she could live." Soren looked around, eyes wide. "You've turned a death world into a living one." Holt smiled. "No, we did, humanity did. That's what we are, builders in the ruins." The soldiers lowered their weapons. The commander turned to his ship, conflicted. Behind them, the planet shimmered faintly with life. When they left, their ship carried a single message, simple, direct, undeniable. Rixar 9 is no longer dead. Captain Daniel Holt remains by choice. The planet recognizes him. And as their engines disappeared into the stars, Holt sat on the ridge, watching the first green mist rise from the horizon. He whispered, "You're breathing now." The ground pulsed gently beneath his hand, slow, calm, alive. For the first time in 1,000 years, Rixar 9 exhaled. And humanity's echo filled the sky. Rixar 9 was changing. The storms that once screamed like dying beasts had quieted. The air shimmered less with poison. The black sand, once dry and lifeless, now carried faint trails of green mist that curled around the stones. From orbit, the planet no longer looked red and angry. It glowed faintly blue, like a wound beginning to heal. And at its heart stood a single house. Captain Daniel Holt worked in silence. His body was thinner now, his face worn, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. Around him, his home pulsed softly with light, alive, steady, loyal. He no longer wore his helmet. The air still stung when he breathed, but it no longer killed him. The living walls filtered out the toxins, releasing faint streams of oxygen and warmth. The planet was learning from him. He touched the wall and it rippled beneath his fingers like skin. "You're growing faster," he murmured. The wall pulsed once, as if answering. He smiled tiredly. "Yeah, me too." The Federation had not forgotten him. On board the Aurora, orbiting high above, the Council gathered again, scientists, soldiers, and politicians. They watched the live feed of the glowing planet below. It was mesmerizing, terrifying, and beautiful. Dr. Rien stood before them, her voice calm but urgent. "Rixar 9 is no longer a death world. It's alive. Captain Holt triggered a planetary transformation, one that's accelerating. We need to study it, not destroy it." The general slammed his fist on the table. "Study it? That planet could destabilize. It's rewriting its own biosphere. What happens when it spreads, when it reaches our colonies?" "It's not spreading violence," she replied sharply. "It's spreading life." "Life we don't understand," the general shot back, "and life we can't control." Those words hung in the air. Dr. Rien met his stare. "That's the point." On the surface, Holt had begun to build again. He had constructed channels of living stone leading from his house outward, like rivers guiding light. The planet followed his lead, filling them with blue energy that pulsed like veins. He no longer mined for the material. It grew on its own, rising gently from the ground, shaped by unseen hands. Sometimes he felt the planet's thoughts, not as words but as feelings. Warmth, curiosity, gratitude. At night when he slept, he dreamed of water, rain falling soft and clean, washing the black dust away. And in the morning, when he woke, he found small droplets of condensation on his windows. It had begun. He wasn't alone anymore. The first signs of life came quietly, a shimmer beneath the sand, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision. Tiny creatures no bigger than his thumb crawled through the glowing moss. Transparent, luminous, fragile, they looked like insects carved from glass. He crouched to study them, awe softening his scarred face. "You made friends," he whispered. "Good job." He reached out and one crawled onto his finger. Its body glowed faintly blue, pulsing in rhythm with the ground beneath him. The creature didn't fear him. It just stared, and for a strange moment, Holt thought he saw himself reflected in its light. Up in orbit, the Aurora's scanners picked up the same readings. Organic life detected on surface, the AI confirmed. The council chamber fell silent. That's impossible, one officer said. Life can't form that fast. Dr. Rien smiled faintly. Unless the planet was never dead, it was waiting. The general leaned forward. Waiting for what? Her eyes flicked to the image of the small house glowing in the darkness. For someone to care. Back on the surface, Holt stood at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a valley that once shimmered with molten heat. Now, faint rivers of light ran through it. He raised his wrist transmitter, patched into the open channel. Federation Command, this is Captain Holt. You don't need to send anyone else. The planet's alive, she's healing herself. You can help, but only if you respect her. There was no reply, only static. He sighed, didn't think so. He turned back toward his home. The blue veins along the walls glowed brighter as he approached, almost welcoming him back. He smiled softly. Don't worry, I'm not leaving. That night the sky caught fire again, not from war but from rebirth. Lightning danced across the horizon, striking the veins of glowing stone and spreading light for miles. The air shimmered with blue rain. The sand melted, reformed, and blossomed into crystalline growths that reflected the stars. It was as if the planet was finally taking a full breath. Holt stood outside, watching in awe as the storm surrounded his house but didn't harm it. He whispered to the wind, "You're beautiful." The ground trembled softly beneath his feet, almost shy. He laughed, a quiet, tired sound full of warmth. "Yeah, I know, I'm proud of you too." In orbit, alarms blared. "Energy readings off the scale," a technician shouted. "The planet, it's glowing from the inside out." The general grabbed the console. "Get him out of there." But Dr. Rien shook her head. "No, don't interfere." "Why?" he barked. She looked at the screen. "Because he's not in danger, he's part of it now." On the surface, the storm reached its peak. The light grew so bright it swallowed everything. Holt closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. He felt warmth fill his body, not burning, not pain, just light. The walls around him pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. He felt the planet's rhythm merging with his own. And for a moment he wasn't separate from Rixar 9 anymore. He was its voice, its pulse, its first breath of life. He whispered through the storm, voice breaking but steady. "You said no creature can live here. You were right, but a human can." The storm softened, the light fading into calm blue glow. The world exhaled. And for the first time in the universe's memory, Rixar 9 bloomed. The storms had ended. Rixar 9 was quiet now, no longer the shrieking, burning wasteland it once was. The red skies had softened into deep violet. The wind carried the scent of wet air, rich with minerals and the faint sweetness of life. Captain Daniel Holt stood outside his house, breathing slowly. His lungs no longer burned. The air was thin, yes, but it was clean. Before him stretched a valley that glittered in pale light. Rivers of blue energy ran like veins through the dark stone. Small green sprouts pushed through cracks, glowing faintly. The planet was changing, slowly, carefully, but it was alive. Holt smiled. "You did it." The ground beneath his feet thrummed softly, as if answering. Up in orbit, the Aurora hovered in silence. The crew stared through the observation windows at the living planet below. "It's beautiful," whispered one of the young officers. No one disagreed. The scanners read oxygen levels rising, temperature stabilizing, and radiation falling. Even without a single machine, Rixar 9 had done what no terraforming project in history had achieved: rebirth. And at the heart of it all, they could still see him, the lone human standing by his home. Dr. Rien recorded her report, her voice low and steady. "Captain Daniel Holt remains on Rixar 9. The planet has accepted him. It responds to his presence almost symbiotically. We don't fully understand the bond, but it's clear he's part of the system now." She paused. Every reading, every pattern, every pulse begins at his coordinates and radiates outward. He is not just surviving, he is living. The council wanted to retrieve him, but when they tried to establish contact, the signal distorted, bending around the planet's frequencies. The AI called it interference. Dr. Rien called it protection. On the surface, Holt recorded his own message. He sat by the window, sunlight glinting off the walls that shimmered like calm water. He looked older now, his hair silvered, his eyes lined with exhaustion and peace. He activated his transmitter. "This is Captain Daniel Holt of the Federation Exploration Corps. If you're hearing this, congratulations. That means I did it." He paused, glancing at the glowing walls. "You said no creature could live here. You were right. No creature could, but humans were different. We don't just endure, we build, even when the world breaks around us." He laughed softly, voice cracking. "I didn't conquer this planet. I listened to it, and it listened back. Maybe that's all we were ever meant to do, learn how to belong." He looked up at the stars. "Don't fear the impossible. Don't run from the places that scare you. Run toward them, because somewhere out there a dead world is waiting for a heartbeat." He ended the recording and leaned back, eyes heavy. Outside, the planet glowed brighter, as if the entire world had heard him. Weeks turned into months. The Federation tried again and again to make contact. Every time the signal returned fragmented, sometimes a faint hum, sometimes a whisper of words. Then one day, all transmissions stopped. The Aurora's sensors still showed life signs on the surface, one pulse, steady and strong, but then even that faded into the planet's rhythm. Dr. Rien stood at the observation deck, her eyes glistening. "He's gone," the general said quietly. She shook her head. "No, he's there, just not in a way we understand." Below them, Rixar 9 shimmered with color, blue, green, gold, like a living jewel in the void. And if one listened carefully through the static of the comms, sometimes a faint voice echoed through the interference. "Keep building." Years passed. Rixar 9 became a legend. They called it the living world. No machine could mine it, no ship could harvest it. It rejected greed and violence alike. But for those who came in peace, it welcomed them with calm skies and clean air. A colony was built, not on the planet, but with it. Humans learned to shape the living stone the way Holt had done, to guide its growth with patience and respect. And at the center of it all, untouched by time, stood the first house. Daniel Holt's home. Its walls still glowed faintly, humming with energy. Inside, no body was ever found. Only his old tools, his journal, and a single message burned into the wall. "Home is not where you stand. It's where the world stands with you." Generations later, children would walk through the valley of glowing roots and point to the small house on the ridge. "Who built that?" they would ask. Their teachers would smile and answer, "A human, the first one to listen when everyone else only tried to command." And at night, when the new settlers looked up at the soft blue aurora that now filled the sky, they swore they could hear a heartbeat in the wind. The heartbeat of a man who refused to give up. A man who built a home on a dead world and made it live again. Far away on the edge of the galaxy, explorers found another planet, lifeless, hostile, silent. And when they landed, they carried with them a saying carved from Holt's last words. They said no creature can live here. So the human built a house. And across the stars, humanity remembered. Not for their wars, not for their machines, but for the one who turned death into life and taught the universe what it truly meant to build.